Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of a podcast for Stock Market College. It is called Now We're Talking with Zelda van Pletsen. The aim of the podcast is to create an awareness, to create impact, albeit small, large. The aim is to create some form of impact, and the persons on the podcast going forward, it literally is now we're talking to and why. Even though Stock Market College teaches the man in the street to trade, understand the financial markets as such, we will not only be talking about the financial markets, but also the people involved with Stock Market College, how they feel about society, the happenings within society, how that impacts on the markets, how that impacts on themselves and their families. And I thought it appropriate today to have the founder of Stock Market College with us, Hardus van Pletsen. Now, I might be a little biased in how and what I say, as many will know that Hardus is not only my husband, but also my business partner. But be that as it may, welcome, Hardus. We are so happy to have you with us. I think it is going to be such a fun interview. We have got some interesting questions for you, and I think people will be surprised by the answers, but also encouraged by some of the answers. So I'm going to start by saying that you are a constant in many a person's lives, my own, our family, but also people that you work with and people that you meet. They see you as a constant. So my first question is, how does that make you feel, knowing that you make others think that of you?
Sure. I'm gonna. I obviously didn't see the questions that you were going to ask beforehand, and I think maybe that was a very good thing. Firstly, I'm immensely proud when you say I'm a constant in people's lives. One of the things that I've always said, and I hope I live up to it, is I want to give the people that I care for the very best that I could possibly give. And I think that, that's important. It's scary when you think that's how people view you. Often it's very scary. But as I said, I'm also proud about it, because you feel good when you feel that you can help people and that they get benefit from their relationship with you, if I could try and put it in that way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I suppose in the same way with saying that you're a constant, today is Father's Day. So I'm going to ask that you're often seen as a mentor to people. When you grew up in really small towns, moving around, I'm going to say the country maybe, and your dad was an accountant, your mom was a stay-at-home mom. If you see where you are today, what did your dad teach you about money and viewing finances that you could possibly or have taken through and utilized in your life, taking into account where you are today?
No, that's an interesting question. Let me tell you what he did teach me is that you can't be conservative with money. And maybe that's, I can see you think that's an unusual answer.
Knowing where how old or where he is today, or the fact that he's no longer around, but that was a long time ago. And ordinarily, looking at that era, it was quite risk averse.
Yes, he was exceptionally risk averse. I mean, he was an accountant. He was the town clerk in this town. So let me tell you what he did teach me. We were very middle-class white South African, a very middle-class white South African family in the days of apartheid. What he did teach me is, or what I did feel or see from him, is that he worked with his money very well. I mean, he received the salary, he budgeted well. I can categorically say we never went home to bed hungry. We never needed anything, in a little town. From what I can remember, there was always food on the table. The bed was warm. I had shoes to wear. He did a very good job with that. What I did see, and I didn't grasp it at that point in time so well, was that he was exceptionally conservative with money, and I think he could have done financially better in his life if he wasn't that conservative. Now, that's, no one wants to criticize their parents, and I don't want to sound like I'm doing that.
Sure.
But it left a lasting impression with me that I have to do better. In hindsight, obviously at the time I didn't hit home. But yeah.
So if you look at what he taught you about money, did that contribute largely to your success today?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to say yes, no, and expand on it a bit more. I like telling people the story because that's how I experienced it. I went to this primary school in this little town called Rouville, and there were 12 kids in my class, which included myself. I was lucky or unlucky that the wealthiest people in the town, their kids were in my class. So there's only one doctor, and one of those kids were in my class, and only one pharmacist, and only 3 really rich farmers. And at the age of 12, I felt that people looked down on my father, on our family, on me, because we didn't have as much money as they had. And that gave me the motivation. At the age of 12, I decided I want to make money. And as I jokingly say, so that I could look down on other people. And to be honest, there was a time of my life where I thought I was better than other people because I made a lot more money. When you're young and stupid, you haven't learned life lessons. So that was definitely the case. But what it did is it gave me a desire to go out there and make money, be successful. So because I didn't want my kids to go through what I feel I went through. And if you're a good parent, anyone that listens to this podcast, at the end of the day, what we really live for is to give our kids a better life than what we've had, a better start to that life. And that was always just, for me, something that I really wanted to do.
Okay. What do you want your kids to learn about money? What would you teach them, or what have you? Because you have 3, 17, 19, 20. What would you like them to learn from what you've achieved? About money, handling money, whether they learn or not, is what would you, or what have you taught them about money based on what your dad taught you, whether you agree or disagree with what he did?
I don't feel like I've necessarily gone to as much trouble as I could or should have to teach them more about money. But if they listen to this podcast one day, the things that I think or things that I think are important is, whatever you do, you've got to keep record of what you do with your money. You've got to, doesn't matter if it's business or private, you've got to know what you're spending your money on. That's the first thing. If you don't keep record, you're like blind. Then I think the second thing that's maybe even more important is you've got to go out there and say, I'm not focusing on how I can cut my expenses and have a worse life than I have now, but you should focus on how do I improve my income so that I don't have to worry what I spend my money on. I can afford whatever I like. And that's, I think, the single biggest thing that limits so many people is they go and they focus in the wrong place. They're not saying, what can I do to make more money? They're saying, what can I do to cut expenses? And that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm. You often mention and post about the fact that you use Tony Robbins' quote, you need to raise your standards. Explain that, and also I think the answer would lean to, well, what does money actually mean to you?
Okay. I've never made it a secret that I want to have a good life. And I think everyone deserves to have a good life. So once again, this is a place where I think people limit themselves. And what I mean by that is, if you want something, the question you should ask yourself is not, or the answer you should give yourself is, oh, I don't know if I can't afford it, or I can't get it, or whatever. For me, if I want something, the questions that come up in my mind immediately is, well, what am I gonna have to do to make it possible? So if I want to buy a new watch, and this is a few $100,000, I'm not saying, oh, well, the first thing I do in my mind is I start moving around the pieces to say, how can I make it possible? But Tony Robbins really put it into good words when we went to Singapore a few years ago, and we attended one of his seminars. I will tell you now what it was called, Unleash the Power Within. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
But he had this saying on the stage, and it stuck with me, and it says, raise your standards. And I'll give you practical examples of how it's worked in our life, your and my life, and in the life of our children. I've always wanted to travel. And a few years ago, we got to the point where we could afford to start traveling. I think our first overseas trip was to Mauritius. And now we've been there 17 odd times or something. And we never want to go back to that place. Okay, maybe it's not that bad, but when you've been to an island holiday 17 times, it's not that exciting anymore, especially if it's the same place. But coming back to it is, I remember distinctly when we went there the first time, we flew economy class, and that's how we did many flights when we started making enough money to travel overseas. And then we went to Holland on a boat trip through the canals, and somewhere on this boat I got an email from Emirates to say, we've got this special, we can upgrade you for your flight home to business class. And if I remember, and this is quite some time ago, it was like really, really cheap. When I say really cheap, it was 30,000 Rand 5 or 6 years ago, which for business class tickets was very little. And we upgraded, and I think you'll remember we arrived at the airport, and I kind of kept it as a surprise. And then we got onto the plane, and suddenly a whole new world opened up to us, because we realized that you can fly for a 24-hour period, like you're sitting on your couch at home in front of your big screen TV in absolute luxury with someone who serves you. But the short story is, once you've experienced that the first time, then for me, maybe not for everyone else, I go and I say, I don't want to go back to economy class. Why would I mean, I'm not even considering it anymore. I've now raised my standards. When I fly overseas on holiday, the very first thing that becomes a non-negotiable is we are definitely going to fly there in business class. And then, unfortunately, then you get to the point where you make a bit more money and you try your first class plane ticket on Emirates, and then suddenly you realize, but they've got an onboard spa and all these other cool things that you can do, and then once again you've raised your standards. So maybe I should summarize it and say, don't be scared to take that step to something better, because it will motivate you. And then maybe that's the best word to use it, because I don't want to necessarily say it'll put you under pressure. It'll motivate you. It should motivate you to keep that standard and do better than what you've done before. Yes, okay. For
sure. Talking about giving advice, or maybe you should think of, if you had to give advice to your younger self, knowing where you are now, what would that be? Would it be any different? Would your path be any different because of X? What advice do you think you would give your younger self? I know, it's not an exact science or anything like that, but hindsight is always there. But what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, for me, that answer is a simple and easy answer that I've thought about often over the last 20 or 30 years, and that advice that I would give myself and that I'd give anyone is find good mentors early in your life. My dad passed away when I was 24. I started my first business when I was 24. I can categorically tell you that I've made every single mistake that you can make, because I didn't have anyone to guide me, to help me, to point me in the right direction, whatever you want to make it. I can tell you that the bank has repossessed my car and my house twice. Never went bankrupt, just by the way, because the courts felt it was a waste of time. And from there, made money and success again. So really the most important piece of advice is find people that are willing to mentor you, that know more than you do, that has had experience in the field that you're interested in, because it'll make your path so much easier. Don't do what I've done and go and screw it up and make the mistakes and bump your head and with no guidance whatsoever. It's not a good way to do it. There's an easier way.
There's an easier way. Okay. What makes you get up in the morning? You've been down, you've lost a business. But what makes you get up? What made you get up then to say, oh, it's not over, I'm not going to take this lying down?
For me, I'm going to say I believe in myself and my ability. And if I lose everything in my life, I wouldn't care, because I would start fresh and sweat bullets and get it back together again. But what motivates me to get up every day is I definitely don't want to be poor. I do not want to struggle. I'm motivated to have a good life. I want the people that I care for to have a good life. I want to raise my standards. I don't want to be satisfied with what cards I'm dealt. I don't want to do what other people do. I don't want to die one day, but before I die, look back on my life and regret what I've not done, I'm quite okay for this to be in this podcast, because that's my alarm that says I've got to take my human growth hormone. And that I do so that my health is okay, and then I take testosterone and a whole lot of other things, because it comes back to raise your standards. But before I forget what I wanted to answer is, I don't want to die one day and lie on my deathbed and think back and regret what I didn't do because I was too scared, or even worse, I couldn't afford to do or try it. That I definitely don't want to do.
If you had to, somebody comes to you and says, what advice would you give me? I'm wanting to start a business, taking the economy into account, what's happening to businesses out there. What would you say to either a young person or somebody who's relatively new? Go ahead, do this. What would you say?
If I'm thinking about the answers right now, I'm going to say the first thing that you need to know is it'll be 10 times harder than what you think it would be. It's never as easy as it looks. That's the first thing I'm going to say. And be prepared for it, of course, because, it's I'm not trying to discourage anyone when I say it's going to be harder than what it looks. I'm trying to make sure that people understand that they must expect that it's going to be harder than what they think, because otherwise they'll fail, because no one's been honest with them. I'd say the second thing that's really critically important is, if you're going to start a business, think before you start. Choose to be in the right industry. Because that's going to make the difference between you trying to put food in the table and you're going to become stinkingly, filthily rich, gangster rich, as I like to call it. And are you going to ask me what kind of businesses I think are good, or shall I just tell everyone?
Just tell everyone.
Am I not the dream of any interviewer?
You're the dream.
You can see we know each other, and it's comfortable when you can say what you think. What I want for my kids, or for anyone else that listens to this, is you want to find some sort of business where you sell something, a product or a service or whatever it might be, that's going to give you a recurring income. Another word for it's annuity income, where you do some initial work and you collect fees on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis from your clients, so that you build so that the longer you are in business, you receive a higher income every single month. Because when you get to the point where your income meets your overheads, expenses, then you are financially secure. Then it doesn't matter what happens, you can pay your bills. You don't start at zero every single month. And good examples of that, if people are listening to the podcast, is Netflix is such a good example, because they had to start the company somewhere. They were renting video cassettes in the old days before they got onto online video renting. But imagine you started Netflix when you started getting people to pay to watch online movies and series and stuff. You started on a day where you had zero customers and zero income, but every single day that passed, you had more customers and more guaranteed recurring annuity income, whatever you want to call it. And that means that the longer you're in business and the bigger you can scale it, the better your cash flow and the money that's going to come in is going to be. And then it's easy to plan, and it's not as stressful as, oh hell, if I don't shake the tree today, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills tomorrow.
For sure. So
Yeah, that's an important factor, maybe the most important factor.
Mm. So Stock Market College is now older than 20 years. Was that the dream?
For the business to be older than 20 years? Are you asking if that's the dream?
Yeah, for you to have had or have a business or build a business that has stood the test of time, that has followed the change that was needed to proceed through the decades based on economy, internet, online learning, COVID. But for yourself, starting a business that started quite small and then taking it to this level, is that what you always wanted? Did you follow the path, or if you had that dream, was it your dream, and has it actually met the expectations that you might have had and your life, for example? So that's two-part question, maybe. Expectation in business and expectation in life.
So the short answer is no.
How did I know that?
But let me give you the long answer. I've always said that for me as a person, I think something that is good about me and also really bad is I don't plan like other people do. I don't consciously plan. Let me use that word. You know, there are people that go right down the 7 steps of what they want to do, and then they project it out for their 5-year and 10-year plan. And I've never had that. When you start a business like Stock Market College, like we did, the first year or two, you're just trying to pay the bills and put food on the table and not go broke. And then year 3 and 4, you're putting food on the table and you're still trying not to get broke, because as the older your business becomes, the more established it becomes, the more the overheads go up because you've got more clients, and you fight this battle constantly. When you've been in business as long as we have, then you become a little bit more wise and you see these cycles, the good times and the bad times. So when it's good, you squirrel away the money that you have and you live very carefully, and then when the hard times come, you survive it better. And some people simply don't survive in business because they run out of resources, because they were not careful enough when they should have been, and they didn't have the experience to know that that's what they should have done. But yes, I mean, I'm immensely proud of 20 odd years of business. What do I see for the future? When I compare this business to other businesses, if you look at really big businesses in South Africa, successful businesses that are 100 years old, all of them started somewhere with a person who decided, I want to be in this business. And it could be something small like, I'm Mrs. Bulls and I'm making chutney because I need some extra money for my family to, okay, now it's produced and sold right across the world. Or I'm doing Oma rusks, or I'm going to teach people how to trade the stock market, or any of those things. For me, I'd like to leave a legacy. I'd like this business to exist long after I'm no longer here. That's ultimately what I'd like now.
So when you speak of a legacy that you're wanting to leave, initially, not everyone, you start a business because you want to make money. I think what also happens is you start that way and then you end up realizing that you're helping people. And if I look at our business and we look at the progress and how you have taken the business from, let's start with an idea and it can make money, it's ended up being, it can help people and has helped many people, not only those employed, but also by way of students in the market and making money. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. If practical advice that I try and give everyone when they ask, well, how have you built the business? And it's such simple but such important advice. And I can often see when I tell people this, they don't seem, that sounds too simple for them to want to believe it or whatever. But for me, the critical thing of growing a business is it's all made up of very small stepping stones. And what I mean by that is you don't go from a one-man show like Stock Market College started to thousands of students and at a point almost 100 staff overnight. You start this business and you sweat and you struggle, and then you do something 1% better than what you've done it before, and a week later you work on something else that you do 0.5% better than what you did before, and a week later you do something else that makes something 0.5% better, and as time goes by, all these very small improvements in your business, it just snowballs, and before you know it, you have this machine that gives people a good product and makes money for the business, for its shareholders, and provides a living for the people that are involved with it. It's all just small improvements, increments that over a period of time just makes such an incredible difference.
What do you want to achieve still want to achieve? Where do you want to see this business going? What do you want to achieve?
Are you talking about the business or me as a person?
I think they go hand in hand because you are quite frankly the business,
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's start with the business and then we can move on to you personally. What is it that you want?
I'd like this business to become a household name, to provide the stock market education, to be known as the gold standard for stock market education, for trading education, for financial markets education right across the world, so that when people say I want to learn to trade, then they know where to go. I'd like that for the business. For myself, some of you might laugh, some of you might very much identify with my answer. I mean, you grow this business, and as you become more successful, you have more because you have disposable income, and suddenly you have a holiday home, and then you have a boat, and then you have a second one, and then you have a jet ski, and before you know it, you've got 5, and then you've got your family and friends and your kids' friends coming to stay for a month. And when the holiday's over, you think, my God, I need another holiday. But what do I want for myself? Here is an interesting answer. I'd like to sleep until I wake up. That's something that I want for myself. So let me explain the answer. I'm going to say we because you and I, you work incredibly hard, you work incredibly long hours to build this business, but I'd like to get the business to the point where it doesn't matter if I'm there or not. It doesn't matter if I give any input or not. The business has grown to the point where the team of people that we have are so good that they don't need me, and that I can go to bed at night and I can sleep, and I don't have to set an alarm. If I want to wake up the next day at 9 o'clock or at midday or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I can do so. So maybe another way of saying, rather than saying I want to sleep until I wake up, is I want to make myself dispensable. That would be fantastic.
It would be. It would be. So in closing, is there anything you would like to add to this podcast, whether it's about money or yourself or the business, anything a quote that you remember, anything you'd like to add that you feel is important that perhaps I haven't asked, anything you'd like to add to the podcast, a book you've read that you feel is really important for somebody who's starting a business that you feel that they should read, something that impacted on your life that you read.
Let me tell you what is the last thing that I'd add to this is you've got to have the right people in your team. And I know you like interviewing me, but I want people to know that an exceptionally large part of where we are today is because of you and what you've put into this business and where we go. So, I mean, it's not something you can't build a big successful business on your own. You have to be in a position where you work with people that you know you can explicitly trust, and people that also have a vested interest in the success of this business as much as you have. Only then does it become possible to really make it happen.
Thank you, love. But it is teamwork, and I am interviewing you. But thank you, appreciate it. So I just want to say, I'm sure this is not the last time we'll be speaking to Hardus about a certain topic, a topic that is meaningful or impactful to him or to me or to the business. So I'd like to thank him for his time. It was a little longer than we thought, but I really appreciate it. It was great chatting. I'm sure the listeners would find the information really interesting. And I just like to end off with a quote. In a society that has you counting money, pounds, calories, and steps, be a rebel and count your blessings instead. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.